Welcome back. Panelists here, former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo of Florida, former Obama Deputy Campaign Manager Stephanie Cutter, NBC News White House correspondent Kristen Welker, and Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post and moderator of Washington Week on PBS. Well, we got a little bit of a preview of the House case and the Senate defense just now. The Democrats are running into a brick wall.
Yeah.
Okay, that was, it is what it is. It seems as if the question is, what is everybody going to look like on the other side?
That's the question, and there seems to right now be a push to rush this to the Senate. The Democrats are signaling they want to be finished with the articles of impeachment by the time they take their next recess. I spoke to sources over the weekend who said the Senate wants to have this wrapped up within 2 weeks. What's interesting is I also talked to some Democrats who say they think Nancy Pelosi should hold the articles of impeachment, not send them to the Senate until the witnesses come and testify. Essentially,
Mulvaney, Bolton, those guys.
Essentially depriving the Senate the right to hold a trial, the right to acquit the president. Partisan warfare.
Look, I have been skeptical we'd ever see a trial, some form or another, because no one's quite sure how this works out.
There will likely be a trial. I've been hanging out at the Senate all week, and Senate Republicans are preparing. That's why McConnell has blocked off everything in January. The question now is, what do the 2020 Republicans who are up for re-election do? Senator Collins, Senator Gardner. They're going to have to pressure Majority Leader McConnell or not in terms of the rules and how this plays out. So far, most of the discussion is about a 5 to 6 week trial. But Senator Rand Paul and others have told me that if this trial is moving in a direction away from the president, if they don't like the way it's unfolding, they may call to dismiss the trial and hold a vote. And that could be the test for McConnell.
Stephanie, I want to ask you a more blatant campaign strategy question about this. I want to show you this graphic. These are just ads about impeachment just this week. Here are the number of ads that Republican-affiliated groups have aired, 4,235. And the number of ads that Democratic-affiliated groups have aired on making the case for impeachment, 1. I know that the Democrats didn't want to look like they were politicizing this. But we're at this public opinion paralysis, arguably because this hasn't been organic. Republicans have done a paid media campaign, and it's at least worked to get it to where we are.
I'm not sure, Chuck, that those ads have split the country. This country's been split for a long time on impeachment. There is a slight majority that do believe that at least impeachment proceedings should proceed, and many who believe that he should be removed from office. A lot of those ads, when you dig down into it, are acquisition ads of people trying to build their own lists and things like that. And I think the difference is Democrats are running ads, but they're running ads on things like getting prescription drugs done or reforming the healthcare system.
But isn't that part of the problem? Look, this is a giant effort that's going on. You're trying to say the President of the United States, shouldn't you all be on one line of...
No, because there's actually, and you've seen this with Speaker Pelosi this week and the week before, this is a somber, serious moment. This is about the impeachment of the President of the United States, because the President of the United States, from the evidence that we've seen in the hearings thus far, and we'll see what comes out in the articles this week, actively solicited foreign interference to secure his own election. And it wasn't the first time that he did it. And it's about a check on that abuse of power and breaking the public trust. That's serious. That's not something you put on Facebook ads to build your own political list. That's something that you run a very straight process through. And Democrats will get credit for that. There is time to build a public case. And also, it's not going to take much convincing that the president is guilty of this. Let's face it.
What's going on in your old district?
Well, Chuck, I think Nancy Pelosi has one more chance to go off script. We know what the script looks like here. Democrats impeach in the House. Republicans refuse to convict in the Senate. The divisions in the country are hardened. And the next election probably becomes in large part about impeachment. Or Nancy Pelosi can bring this to the brink and say, you know what? We're so close to the election that we're going to trust the American people to make this decision.
What about this third idea? What about this third idea over here?
We're going to do something different, something that's unexpected, something that, rather than making a point, can make a difference in the country, can scramble our politics. A message to the American people that maybe a lot of you don't trust the government, but we're actually going to trust you to try to help fix this republic. I think our nation is due for that kind of moment.
Stephanie, I'm curious of this, what Kristen's reporting, this third option
Waiting
of
until
waiting. Is
some-
that a real? How real
Well,
is that in your mind?
Well, I think that there is concern that if they move to the Senate too quickly and McConnell doesn't let new evidence be considered, because there is a real chance that new evidence will come out. There's active investigation. The court's going to rule on McGahn. That'll have an impact on Bolton. You know, there could be some administration witnesses that will be compelled to testify. That's all on the table. If McConnell sets rules that doesn't allow new evidence to be considered, then
There's another wild card, Rudy Giuliani. I mean, he is blatantly thumbing his nose at the Justice Department, SDNY. I mean, he's got associates under indictment. He may or may not be under a target of an investigation. What is he doing?
He's been over in Ukraine, and he's sending a signal to Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill. Some of them are wary, but they're only being wary privately. They think the president is going to conduct political war in the coming 5 to 10 weeks, making his own case on Ukraine and corruption. We've heard echoes of it in Senator Cruz's interview with you. I did a front page story for the Post this week about how the GOP is embracing the idea of Ukrainian interference, despite testimony from U.S. officials that counters that entire
By the
narrative.
way, testimony that Senator Ted Cruz elicited this week, for what it's worth.
You nailed it, Chuck. They're equating op-ed articles and political opinions with interference.
Rudy Giuliani is basically flouting the entire process, thumbing his nose, dangling the possibility that he might be releasing more information. And in text messages, I said, are you in fact going to turn over some type of information to Congress? And Attorney General Bill Barr, as the president signaled he might do, he said he hasn't made any determination about that just yet. Privately, as Robert points out, I think that you have some Republicans who are a little uncomfortable and wondering, where is all of this going to go?
I think even Matt Gaetz,
even worse.
I think even Matt
Correct.
Gaetz expressed going, I don't know what Rudy's up
And
to.
don't forget about Giuliani. Beyond Giuliani, we have a Justice Department IG report and Barr's own
Right.
report coming out. So there's going to be a lot of new information coming out.
Hey, Kristen, very quickly before we go, the president went really quickly in basically defending Saudi Arabia before we know anything here. And already the president basically is on an island when it comes to Saudi Arabia these days. It's one of the few places where I think he hasn't been able to convince more Republicans to come over.
You have the shooting at the Naval Air Base in Pensacola, and you have President Trump tweeting out essentially that he got that phone call from the leader of Saudi Arabia apologizing. And it underscores how complicated his relationship is, the United States' relationship is with Saudi Arabia. So far, they have not called that terrorism, but based on my conversations, all signs are pointing in that direction.
Candidate Trump. What would candidate Trump have tweeted? Hello from Washington. I'm Chuck Todd, and thanks for checking out the Meet the Press channel on YouTube. Click on the button down here to subscribe and click over here to watch the latest interviews, highlights, and other digital exclusives.